Today my guest is John Miller. John, how are you, sir?
Good, Dave.
What do you do?
What do I do? I am a business intelligence technology specialist for Microsoft Corporation. I cover Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee in the Heartland District.
All right. You've been talking today a lot about SQL Server and some of the BI tools in SQL Server. One thing that caught my eye was PowerPivot.
Yeah.
What is that?
Interesting. We introduced in SQL Server 2008 R2. In fact, that came out right alongside Office 2010. And what PowerPivot is kind of a unique solution that you don't see really other vendors or products offering. It's what we call managed self-service BI. And I mean, if you just think about those terms, they don't tend to go together very well. Self-service and business intelligence. Normally to do anything with business intelligence, you're typically looking at getting IT involved and having them go out and pull the data in. We call that extraction, transformation, and load. So they pull the data in, they put it into a data warehouse, they try to rationalize it. So if I'm pulling data in from my supply chain and my ERP solution and another system, I've got to make sure that data matches up so it can join.
Right.
And so usually to do business intelligence, just to get to the point where you can build reports, right, a lot of times there can be a lot of work on the front end.
And a lot of time as well.
And a lot of time, yeah. A lot of pain and suffering.
So this is now empowering users?
Yeah.
So it'll do that same thing?
We are. What we've done is Microsoft has a product called SQL Server Analysis Services. And analysis services, the way that it works is for the viewers that are familiar with pivot tables in Excel.
Yep.
It essentially allows you to build a pivot table, but the pivot table is on steroids, right? So it runs on a server and can handle much larger volumes of data.
All right.
So if I wanted to build a pivot table in Excel today, using just standard Excel, pull some data in, build a pivot table, I'm limited to working with 1 million rows. Analysis services allows me to go way past that. So it lets me work with tens of millions, hundreds of millions of rows. And then that's analysis services.
Okay, that's been out since what, SQL 2000?
SQL
right?
7, yeah.
SQL 7.
It's been out 12 years, almost as long as I've been here at Microsoft.
So what does PowerPivot add to that?
So what does PowerPivot add to that? Really kind of a unique fit in the space. The best way to describe it is two parts. First of all, there's an in-memory business intelligence engine that lives underneath Excel. It allows me to go out and acquire data from these source systems, bring it back, put it into Excel, but where Excel is limited to 1 million rows, this allows me to go to many more millions of rows. Literally, we've got a demo where we show that it has 100 million rows.
100 million rows, and yet it's in memory? That doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, you wouldn't think it would make sense, right? So I'm pulling that data back. One of the neat tricks that this in-memory BI engine does, and it's called Vertipack, that's the name, so if you hear me refer to it as Vertipack, pulls that data back, and the first thing it does is it compresses it. Now, we've made some revolutionary breakthroughs in compression, even beyond what analysis services did. Analysis services, it wouldn't be unusual for me to see a 3-to-1, maybe even as much as a 10-to-1 compression ratio as I pull the data in from a data warehouse and build a cube over it. But that's running on a server. That's not going to work in PowerPivot, right? What I need to be able to do is pull that data back and actually compress it much tighter. So it uses an approach called columnar-based compression. And what that does is it takes advantage of the fact that when you're working with data, there's a lot of repeating values oftentimes, especially in data warehouse or business intelligence.
Right.
Make the same sale to a lot of customers. I make the same sale to of the same product, that sort of thing. Yep. So I've got a lot of repeating values. Interestingly enough, that compresses very well using this new technique called columnar-based compression. So what we've done is we've been able to compress the data exponentially more than what we were doing with analysis services. So it compresses it much finer and allows me to actually work with that data in memory.
Okay, so the end user is using Excel as their front end,
right,
to view BI data,
right,
that can be huge sets of data,
right.
And what's that experience like for them? What do they actually see when they open up Excel and connect those data?
So here's what's interesting about this. It's a neat trick. The way customers used to solve this problem, right? They'd come to IT and they'd ask the IT group, "We need some help getting at this data. We need to do some analysis. I've got a business problem. We want to buy a new company, or we want to make an acquisition, and we need to do the analysis to figure out whether or not that can happen." You go to IT and you ask them to do that, and they say, well, we're going to pull the data in, we're going to do the transformation of it, we're going to build a data warehouse, we're going to build a cube over that. If I give it high priority, I can turn this around to you in 3 months, maybe 6 months. Well, for a lot of end users, they're not willing to wait 3 months.
That's a deal killer right there.
If I've got a pressing business problem, I need a solution maybe this week,
right?
Maybe within a couple days, an hour. So I need to be able to turn things around faster. Well, the traditional approach is end users would go out and get Microsoft Access, right? They'd ask IT to give them a connection to the data. Then what would they do? Go out, grab the data, right back into Access, join it themselves. Once they had it, what we call mashed up, right? They pulled the data back, they've done the transformation, they've joined it up. Then what they would do is they would drop it out into a single file, a flat file, either CSV or Excel. Then they go into their favorite reporting tool, which happens to be Excel.
Right.
So Excel being the world's most popular BI tool, they would go out there and build the reports that they needed from that. Now that's problematic. And the problem that it presents for IT in particular is once that data comes out of the system, they no longer have control over it. So it starts to age immediately.
It's immediately aging, yeah.
It's, I have no control over it. So if somebody walks outside the organization, I've got compliance issues. It's aging, it may not be refreshed, so if you come into a meeting with your set of data, I've got a different set of data. It creates something that we have heard from a lot of customers that they complain about, particularly the IT group. They call them spread marts. And spread marts are very bad things.
Spread marts?
Spread marts. So instead of a data mart or a data warehouse, think of this as a mart in a spreadsheet that I built myself, but it's rogue. IT has no control over it once I pull it out of the system. And that's a lot of bad things associated with that we just talked about.
So it sounds like you've acknowledged that users are going to do this anyway.
They're going to do it anyway.
Let's give a more compliant way, a more way that we at least get IT involved in that process.
Right. So a couple different problems we're trying to solve. One, the business has needs. End users have needs. They're going to go find a way to get this done by hook or by crook. You can be with them or you can be against them as IT. So the first thing we wanted to do was give the end users a tool that they could go out and acquire data and bring it back in. That in-memory BI engine, that VertiPack, is really important to be able to pull back large volumes of data and to be able to join it and to be able to transform it. And we call that mashup, right? I want to be able to mash things up. I want to get it into a format where I can actually build a report off of it. What that's actually doing is that's building a pivot table that is much more capable than a 1 million row pivot table in Excel, because I can literally bring back tens of millions or hundreds of millions of rows into this thing and work with it on my desktop. And it's very robust because it's in memory and it's using this compression. As you sort the data, filter the data, that sort of a thing, it's happening almost at the speed of thought for the end users, which the end users like.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Because they can very quickly prototype what they want.
Yep.
So then the other important part is that's acquiring the data. So when you actually use and install PowerPivot, you'll see this on the ribbon, you'll see a little PowerPivot ribbon show up, and you click on that, and then there's a thing that says PowerPivot, looks like a cube. You click on that, and that takes you to a window behind Excel. So what's interesting is when you're working in Excel, you'll be in Excel, but then a window pops up kind of behind it.
Okay.
And you can flip back and forth. As I go back to the PowerPivot, I go out and acquire data, I bring it back, and that's where I can actually join it, transform it, that sort of thing myself as an end user. This is what they used to do with Excel,
right?
Or I'm sorry, with Access. Then, when I want to build a report, what I can do is I can, after I've joined it, and after I've transformed it into a way that I can actually use the data, I can now go out and treat that just like another pivot table. And so what the end users like is each one of those tables then surfaces as basically a different dimension that they can start to drag and drop data on and build, drill down reports, control bank reports, charts, and it's highly interactive, which enables me to go do my analysis without having to have had to get IT involved.
Okay, and that's a live data source, so as the data on the back end changes, you can refresh it in Excel and in your reports.
Exactly. So data is just like, it's going to be like any other tool in that I've got to go run a query and I've got to wait for that data to come back. So that's going to take the same amount of time as if you work with any other tool. No way you can get around that because you've got to run a query against the data source and bring the data back.
But at least you got a chance of that. It's not in a common limited file somewhere that's basically one dump.
Well, it's actually in this in-memory BI engine. So it's streaming back into a very efficient mechanism that allows me to work with it. Now the neat thing is The way I transform the data is I use a lot of the common Excel functions that I already know. Let's say I've got a date column, and I've got the month and the year, and I want to join those together to create a composite key. I can actually use a concatenate function. Or if I wanted to pull a substring off, I could use like a substring function. If I need to convert it to a character, I can use a trim function, take a numeric, and by trimming it, create a character. So
adding numbers, adding dates,
right.
aggregation functions that are built into Excel.
Right. And so we borrowed very, very heavily on the Excel functions that already exist in Excel. Then we added some new functions as well. And together we call that DAX. We call that Data Analysis Expressions.
Okay.
So you can think of DAX as a superset of functions. It's a lot of the common Excel functions I use day in and day out in my job, plus some functions that I have to do relational. So if I want to pull in data, let's say I'm in this table, and I've got 3 separate tables. I've got product category, subcategory, and product. I could give that to the end user, and they could go fish around in the tables and find product category and subcategory. Wouldn't it be nicer if I could put that all in product and just give them one table to go look at when they want to drill down? So I could do a related table function, go grab that column and bring it back into product, and what I can do is I can collapse and give them fewer things to have to go fish through.
I see, okay.
So what I'm doing, and we call all of that type of stuff, substringing, concatenating, all that mashup. I'm mashing up the data into a form that's going to enable me and empower me to be able to build a report off of it. Once I've got the data the way I want it, then I want to start building reports.
Okay. You mentioned installing PowerPivot. Is that something I download somewhere? Or?
It is actually. You'll find it out on PowerPivot.com. It's a free download. Now the one caveat is it will only work with Excel 2010. Okay. So you do have to have Excel 2010. There's a client component of it. That client component that has an in-memory BI engine, VertiPack, that is what you go out and you get and download from PowerPivot.com. It comes in 2 formats, either 32-bit or 64-bit, and you want to make sure you match up the appropriate add-in for whatever version of Office you're running. Okay. You bring that down, you install it. That's what allows you to go out and acquire data and start authoring reports. Okay, that's the client component of it. There is also a SharePoint component of this as well. So imagine this: I've built this report. I'm able to slice and dice. I've got this nice pivot table. I pulled the data down. I now want to share that with you. Not a big deal if I try to send it to you through email or I put it up on a file share.
But I need to have Office 2010.
You'd have to have Office 2010. You'd have to have PowerPivot installed. Okay. You have that. You're good to go. You could go out and open it up.
Okay.
What happens if you don't? What if I haven't deployed Office 2010 across the organization yet? Or, more importantly, what if I want to share this with somebody outside my organization? And I don't know if they have Office 2010. Maybe their desktop is locked down, but they're a trading partner of mine. And I would like to build these reports and be able to share them with my suppliers and customers.
So there's no way you can do that. You're totally lost, right?
I wouldn't be able to do it using that traditional approach.
Right.
The way I can do it,
I figured there was a way,
is I can actually stand up inside SharePoint. You need to have the eCal version of SharePoint. You also have to have 2010 SharePoint.
Okay.
There's a new capability in SharePoint called PowerPivot Service. I turn that on. I now save that PowerPivot spreadsheet that I built to SharePoint, and now you can go up with just a browser, nothing on your desktop except Internet Explorer or Safari or one of the browsers. Go up there, open up your SharePoint site, and you can now start to interact with that report. Oh. Now, you can't author it. You do have to have the PowerPivot add-in under Excel to author reports and build new reports, but you can fully interact with the report. You can drill up, drill down, pivot, do the types of things that you commonly have to do, filtering, to be able to deliver a report. If you think about typical operational reports, right. They get delivered that way all the time through browsers.
So the PowerPivot services, it's similar to the Excel services. Does that ship with SharePoint 2010, or is that also a separate download?
Yeah, interestingly enough, it does not ship with SharePoint 2010. You would think it would, but it was actually built by the SQL Server team.
Okay.
The SQL Server team, the business intelligence side of that business, built this technology. They built the add-in for Excel. And what's interesting is that service is actually analysis services under the covers.
Okay.
So it's a battle-proven, very scalable solution. We've got customers running as much as 12 terabytes of data in a single queue, with hundreds and thousands of users going against this. So this is a very scalable server-based product. what we did is we basically took that engine and we added the PowerPivot capability to it. And when you want to use PowerPivot services under SharePoint, you stand up SharePoint first, and then you can actually go out and run the SQL Server bits. You have to use the SQL Server install bits, and when it comes up, you can actually run through the install, and it'll prompt you for what components of SQL you want to install.
It's a component of
one of the
SQL
components
installs.
is PowerPivot services.
That's SQL Server 2008 R2.
Right.
Okay.
And that will only install into SharePoint 2010. So you do have to have both. You have to have SharePoint 2010, those bits, you run through it, it installs and configures, and then once you've got that service stood up in SharePoint, now you can publish your reports that you built into SharePoint.
Outstanding. Anything else?
No, it's really gaining a lot of attention though. End users really like it. I've been showing this to customers. I've had customers downloading it and getting going on their own. What's interesting is they've been doing this for years.
I've been in those organizations where everybody's got Excel and they're all creating their ad hoc queries through it.
Absolutely. And so they've been figuring out how to do this on their own. I've talked to some folks in IT and they say, well, I don't know if my end users can figure this out. It looks a little complicated. Trust me. They've been doing it the hard way with Access.
Right.
They've been doing it with Excel for years. What we're giving them is actually much easier and much better to use. The other thing that's nice about this is it solves that spread mode problem. Big problem for IT is once I actually publish that into SharePoint, there's a dashboard for them. You can go out and you can see who's using those spreadsheets. You can actually control when the data gets reprocessed. So if I've got that published out there, typically I'll have a data refresh set up. Let's say the end users accidentally set that data refresh up to be daily, but you know that data doesn't change because you built the data warehouse. It's not changing but once a week. You can go and adjust that data refresh.
Okay.
If they got the data from the wrong place, you can point them, you can reset that query to go to a different place. So IT is in the game now. They're not alienated, and it enables you to actually go out and see where they pulled that data in. And I'll tell you the thing I really like about it. I've built a number of business intelligence solutions and data warehouses with customers. The hardest thing with customers and end users to get right in building a data warehouse is getting them the right data that they trust. You give them data that's incorrect or that they don't trust, they won't use it. Right. The other thing that's really hard is data warehousing and business intelligence by its very nature seems to be iterative. Right. The first time I stand it up, it's not right. End users run reports, and those answers that they get from those reports lead to more questions. And then those answers lead to more questions. And so business intelligence by its very nature seems to be an iterative process that the more I do, the closer I get, the more solid my solution becomes.
That iteration cycle, that feedback cycle.
It actually lets the end users go out and do prototyping themselves.
Right.
They can actually they can validate the data, they can get very close to a final solution. Once they've got it very close, if it's something I think the entire organization could benefit from, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that, what they've built, they've already done the requirements definition, I'm going to be able to turn that into a business intelligence solution for the whole company, take their best practices, and very easily be able to share it across my entire organization. And that's cool.
Nice, very cool. Do you have online presence?
I do, yes.
Where's that?
I use SkyDrive, actually, for posting most of my PowerPoints and stuff when I share with customers. And of course, I also post to blogs and stuff occasionally.
What's the URL?
Boy, I post to different people's blogs.
Really?
I don't have my own. I don't have. It seems like I don't have time. I probably should spend more time and put up my own URL. But what I do is I contribute to content in the forums and other mechanisms. So.
Great. John, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's nice being part of Technology and Friends. It's nice being part of Technology and Friends.